Welcome to the Cold Case Christianity broadcast, the only Christian case-making program hosted by a cold case homicide detective. J. Warner Wallace has been investigating cold case murders in Los Angeles County for over a decade. His work has been featured on Fox News, Court TV, and Dateline. For more information about Jim's work and the case for Christianity, please visit coldcasechristianity.com. Now, here's your host, J. Warner Wallace.
Thanks for joining us at Cold Case Christianity. I'm J. Warner Wallace. As we've been continuing our series on quick shot answers, I've actually been looking forward to this episode because we're going to deal with a topic that I find particularly fascinating because I've seen the objection to Christianity offered a number of ways, and I've seen how sometimes people struggle with how to respond to this. Now, we are in the middle of this series, as you know, of quick shot responses. Hopefully these are rhetorically powerful answers to some of the most common objections that people level in conversation. And our hope, if you go to our website and take a look at the website, you'll see that we have an entire section there with just quick shots. It's in the writing section, but also you can find a link to our app, and in the app you can access these answers really quickly. And that's our goal, is to give you unlike maybe a larger written document, remember we spent 1,000 words trying to answer. Well, if you had to answer these objections just briefly, if you had, a minute or less to answer the objection, because you're in a conversation with somebody and you don't have more than a minute, let's say, what would you say to the most common objections that are leveled against Christianity? So we're going to try to do that in this episode as well. And I want to deal with an objection that I may have to explain after I put it on the screen for you. So let's go ahead and put it on the screen. And it is this one: Earth is just a pale blue dot in a huge hostile universe. Now, I think the reason why this has emerged in kind of this language that we're using, the pale blue dot language, is because it's been offered as Carl Sagan first offered it when Voyager, the satellite that was launched out to the furthest reaches of the solar system, as it was leaving our solar system, it turned its camera back toward Earth and took a photograph. And what it looks like, and in the photograph, there's one pale blue dot, a speck in an entire sea of black space with other dots of stars in the background. And this little pale blue dot, when it's seen in the context of this huge screen filled with space, there's a sense in which you feel kind of insignificant, right? This thing that we think of as the center of our living universe, if not the universe proper, but our experience, the center of our experience is on planet Earth. And we think of it as being meaningful, huge, robust, but reality is, compared to the vastness of space, Earth is simply a pale blue dot, a speck in a larger landscape. And I think this observation gives some people the idea that why would you think as Christians that you are so special? I can see why primitive humans might write a religious text in which they write it as though we're somehow the center of God's creation. Really? That little pale blue dot in a universe that contains millions of other planets that are probably similar. You think you're that special? You think that God has got everything is centered on planet Earth? That his focus is on planet Earth? That why is there all that other space then? Why is there so much of the universe that is either hostile to life? This makes us look more like an accident in the midst of a much larger hostile universe than it makes us look like the special creation. We don't seem all that special in that picture. We just seem like a small blue speck in a vast collection of universal stuff. So I can see why this is offered sometimes as a meme. You'll see it online as a meme. You'll see people make the objection on social media. You'll see people play clips of the pale blue dot excerpt, from one of his shows, Cosmos. And then they kind of offer this as, you people who you think this script, this sacred text is somehow reliable and tells us something true about the universe, yet it clearly does not seem to grasp the insignificant nature of Earth relative to everything else. We're not special. We're just a pale blue dot. That's where I think the objection is meant to go. So I think we have to kind of be ready to respond to that. Now, I actually have been looking forward to talking about it because I think it is visually stunning when you see the image of the pale blue dot image that everyone always talks about. So I think we have to be able to answer this, especially in an age in which science has been revered and elevated. We know everything that's worth knowing, right, by way of science. I mean, we've talked about that in a prior episode of this series of quick shot responses. This idea of scientism, this notion that anything that can be known that has value in knowing to begin with could be discovered by way of science. Science tells you everything. Well, this is one of those objections that seems to be firmly rooted in a relatively recent science, the way we are looking at the cosmos around us. This idea that you're not that special. And any sacred book that would describe Earth as being somehow special is missing it, because those folks just didn't know how unspectacular the pale blue dot really is. Well, let's try to answer this. I'm going to give you 3 ways that, and I'll try to unpack those for you. All of these were designed to be brief. Some of them are going to help you tell stories. And I think that's powerful in a culture that loves narratives and loves story. We want to be able to answer in the form of story. So we're going to give you 3 ways to answer this kind of growingly common objection, the pale blue dot objection. So I'll put the first one on the screen. And what we're going to do in this first response is we are going to leverage this notion that the objection is really rooted in the idea that this does not look, some people will approach it this way. They'll say, hey, the universe, if anything, in a picture like that, does not look like it's been specially designed for this gem, because the thing just feels like it's another grain of sand on a long beach full of grains. As a matter of fact, it looks to me like you're existing, this speck is an entirely hostile universe in which you, as a Christian, are arguing that all of that space then is hostile to life. Why would, if that's the case, I mean, the hostility, if God's creating a specially designed universe in which Earth is the center point, why would it be so hostile? We're going to leverage that aspect of the objection in our first response. Let me put it on the screen for you. Okay, I think I'm going to go ahead and agree with that notion just to respond, to kind of take away the fire of the notion. Let me tell you how I would do it. I would say, look, I agree that the universe is hostile to life. I mean, that image you're showing me does make it look like we're lucky to be here at all, right? There's another grain of sand in this big beach. But how does the hostility of the universe make a case against God? And doesn't the existence of a planet like Earth, a planet like ours, that appears to overcome the statistically impossible odds of existing at all, given such an unfavorable, hostile universe, right? Especially given the level of fine-tuning that's required for a planet to support life. Look, that's a very narrow range. The fine-tuning required to live on a planet like ours is incredibly improbable. And if given that level of fine-tuning, doesn't this existence of a planet at all in such a hostile environment demonstrate the need for divine intervention? I mean, do you really think that we would be here at all if not for God's somehow overcoming the hostility of all of that? The odds of a planet like Earth, right, supporting the kind of life that it supports so we can have this conversation, it seems to me to be more than just statistically improbable. This is why we don't see life elsewhere. It's not just improbable, it's miraculous. Why wouldn't the existence of a planet like ours, right, that's finely tuned for the existence of carbon-based life like ours, why wouldn't that demonstrate the existence of a divine creator? Now, my goal here in this first response, because I think what they're trying to offer is that, hey, given how hostile and improbable, we're just a lucky accident. But the problem is that the odds of having the lucky accident are more than improbable. They're supernatural. And I think it really points to the need for someone to come in and do something, to intervene in some way. As a matter of fact, I think it could be argued that a photograph like that in the mind of the Creator ought to help us see the Creator, to realize the need for a Creator. Why would there be a hostile universe to begin with? Because then it points to us, once we discover that hostile universe, we really get it. And we know, wow, we're even more certain of the need for a creator. I actually think that one way we can respond to this is to just address that issue, that narrow part of the objection, which is really grounded in the idea that this is not a fine-tuned universe, because the assumption is that the fine-tuning of the universe would make it look much more plausible that we would exist, that we would see that the universe is very friendly to our existence. And then when we discover it's not, we're thinking, oh, there can't be a creator, because he certainly wouldn't fine-tune a universe to look that hostile, would he? Why wouldn't he? And why wouldn't our existence within such an environment demonstrate the need to tinker with the conditions to allow our existence? Something to think about. And it's a way to start the conversation. And as you see, I try to end conversations like this by posing a question that hopefully will generate more interaction. Let's take a break. When we come back, we'll give you another way to respond to the objection related to the pale blue dot we call planet Earth.
Welcome to the 1 Minute Apologist. We interview the world's leading apologists to provide credible answers to curious questions. Welcome to the 1 Minute Apologist. My name is Bobby Conway, and I am here with detective and Christian apologist and author of Cold Case Christianity, J. Warner Wallace. Good to have you on the program,
Thanks
bud.
for having me. I appreciate it.
I have so appreciated just your passion for Christ, your friendship, and the work that you are doing, bud. It is just spectacular. And I like your approach, case making. What do we mean by case making, Christian case making?
Well, most of the time as a new Christian, I was 35 years old, and someone first started asking me, well, have you ever read any apologetics books? And I didn't even know what apologetics meant. But that word, if you know where it comes from in Scripture, is from this Greek word apologia, which really means to make a defense. And the way it's used, Paul, for example, is described in this way in the book of Acts, making a defense for what he believes. But I always thought that the word apologetics, most people when they hear it, they're not comfortable with it, especially non-Christians, right? They're going to say, what are you apologizing for? Or if you say, well, it's about making a defense. Well, what are you defensive about? Okay, so either way, you seem like you kind of lose. But in the end, I think that we are really making a case for what we believe. And that seems to me to be, number one, not apologetic, and number two, not defensive. So for the most part, I've kind of limited the way I describe what I do. You might say, well, we're Christian apologists. You and I both do this. We make a defense. But I've started to say, well, no, I'm a Christian case maker, because most people understand what that means immediately. Mm-hmm. I make a case for Christianity. And so I think if we use this term, we kind of see ourselves this way. We see ourselves in a positive sense as somebody making a positive case for what we believe rather than as a defensive position, or we're apologizing for what we believe. And I think this is a better place for us to be, to call ourselves Christian case makers. Okay, now I'm going to give you a second answer to the objection, a second way to kind of initiate a conversation, to continue the conversation, to overcome the hurdle of the obstacle that's being presented to you in the conversation. And this is going to be a little bit longer. And so I think that most of our quick shots have been as brief as the last one I just gave you. But sometimes if I want to tell a story, to offer an example, to tell a parable that kind of makes the thing clear, makes the issue clear, that takes a lot more time to unwrap, right? I can't just rifle through that. So as I offer this kind of storytelling or narrative or parable in the next couple of responses, I just want you to be able to contextualize it in your own language. And so this is what Jesus did. He'll say this issue, this big theological issue is like this. And then he tells a story in the context of his culture that makes sense of the more difficult theological issue he's trying to communicate. So let me show you another way that we could respond to this objection, and I'll put it on the screen. As I do this now, remember I'm putting it on the screen so you can see how I will sometimes modify. And I just think the structure of seeing it line by line is helpful to help you remember it. So I'll put it on the screen for you right now. Okay, here we're going to try to offer an example. Okay, I get the idea that it makes. I understand the objection, but let me just give you something to think about. a scenario. Imagine finding yourself, for example, you're in this vast desert. Here in Southern California, we have lots of these big desert areas. And it's stretching for hundreds of miles in every direction. As you turn, there's not a road to be seen, not a structure to be seen. It's just desert, man. It's like, yucca trees and cactuses and dirt. And you're walking through this huge desert area with this wasteland, and you discover a stone. Well, there's a ton of rocks and stones on the floor of this desert, but this one's different. You look at it, you examine it closely, and you find that it's got writing on it. There are words written on what appears to be dried blood. Yeah, that's right. You're talking to a homicide detective, so you're only going to get this kind of a story, right? And this message is pretty clear. It says, "Help! I've been kidnapped and I'm being held hostage a mile from here in a small red shack. Please contact authorities." All right, here's my question. Should we ignore the stone? I mean, should we just look at that message and just toss it back into the ground? Throw it back because there's a ton of other stones on the ground, right? There's millions of other stones. This is a big desert, right? Why should we think that this little stone is any more special than anything else we see in the desert, all those other stones? Even though, you look at all the other stones, they don't have any writing on them, but who cares? Why would this one stone that contains writing draw our attention? Why would we care? It's just another stone among millions. And they've all been here a super long time. Now, I think most of us would not just ignore the writing on the stone. I think we would take it and think something's different about this stone. Can you see why it doesn't really matter how big the desert is, how many stones there are in the desert, or how long the stones have been out there in the desert, or even how old the desert is? None of that matters, because what you have is something special in your hand in that stone. It bears the hallmark of design, of intelligence. It's begging us to investigate further, to find who wrote that message, who is the author of the message. In other words, although there's lots of stones in that desert, although the desert's big, it's old, it's vast, this stone demonstrates the existence of an intelligent author. Now think about that for a second. Our little pale blue dot that we call Earth, that's special. I don't care how many other planets there are out there. I don't care how many other rocks there are in this desert. This one, the pale blue dot, it bears the hallmark of design and intelligence. It contains something different than all the rest, even the rest of the planets in our own solar system. Can you see why it begs us to do the same thing that the rock begs us to do? It begs us to investigate further, to find the author, not of the message on the stone, but the author of life on this rock that we call Earth. Now the goal here is to ask the question, who cares how big are you saying that there's something about the vastness of the universe that ought to negate the obvious signs of design we find on this rock? I mean, we talk about the narrow parameters, the narrow restrictions, the universal constants, but even the size of this rock related to the distance to the Earth, to the sun, how far it is, what the gravitational forces are, how deep the mantle crust of the Earth has to be in order for us to have life on it, what the composition of the atmosphere, the depth of the atmosphere. There are so many restraints, so many fine-tuned issues that have to be perfectly fine-tuned, that it's really hard to imagine getting this by just chance. Then you have on the rock good evidence for design in the information we see in DNA. We even have what everyone already admits is the appearance of design in biology. Even atheists like Richard Dawkins admit that at least there appears to be design in biology. So I would argue that this rock is different. You're just not going to walk right by that. That's got a message on that rock in the desert. You're going to handle it differently. I think you ought to be handling this rock differently too. This actually should cause us to seek out the author of life. All right, we'll take a break. We'll come back. I'll give you one last way to answer the pale blue dot objection.
Be sure to visit the Cold Case Christianity website daily to read Jim's blog, watch the weekly video, or listen to the Cold Case Christianity podcast. You'll also find great free resources, including the free downloadable monthly Bible insert. While you're there, be sure to sign up for Jim's daily Case Notes email. Cold Case Christianity is designed to help you become a better Christian casemaker. Connect with Cold Case Christianity on social media. Visit the Cold Case Christianity homepage and click the social media icons on the top right toolbar. Jim is active on Facebook and Twitter, posting the best apologetics articles from over 250 Christian blogs around the country. You'll also find links to Jim's Instagram, Pinterest, and Google Plus accounts, along with a link to the Cold Case Christianity YouTube page. Stay connected with Cold Case Christianity and become a better Christian casemaker.
Okay, now this response is similar to the second response in that I want to tell a little story. I want to provide a parable, an analogy that will help my person I'm talking to see it. And I think sometimes a good analogy ends the conversation. I think a good analogy can settle it, rather than let me give you 8 reasons or make a case or if this then that. No, I think sometimes just this kind of storytelling can help people to overcome their doubts, overcome their own objections. So I want to do that again, but slightly change the story. Now, what I'm trying to capitalize in this third response, I hear sometimes the pale blue dot kind of objection drifts toward, well, if you're suggesting that God, why does the universe even need to be that big? It looks to me more like this is a random chance dot of life in a vast mess of non-life than it looks like this is a specially designed environment for this dot, the pale blue dot called Earth. In other words, if God was going to design this environment to produce life on Earth, why would he need all that junk that we see in the universe that doesn't support life? That seems to me, I would have said as an atheist, that seems to me to be more like random than it is like specially designed. Especially designed, the universe could be quite small. You don't need a bunch of possible planets in order for the odds to be overcome to get this one. God could do it if there were only 2 rocks. Only 2 planets in the entire universe. They could both contain life. So wouldn't that be what we would expect? Okay, that's the approach. That's the specific objection I am trying to answer in this next response. Okay, so let's take a look on the screen. You'll see how I'm going to do it. Okay, I want to give you a story to help you kind of think this out. I want you to imagine that someone, for a special holiday or whatever, asks you to bake a very small cupcake, okay? And they want you to bake it. They require you, in fact, to bake it from scratch. Because you might think, oh, I can just go get it on the store and get a mix. Nope. They want you to bake it from scratch. I mean, it's worse than scratch. They don't even want you to go down and buy flour, prepackaged flour or prepackaged sugar or corn oil or butter or any of that. They mean scratch. Instead, they want you to either grow or harvest or grind or process or churn the butter. I mean, they want you to work from zero. All the elements have to be the ones that are found raw in nature and then brought to the table. So you can't just go get flour, because flour isn't found that way in nature. You have to grow the wheat, grind it, create the flour, bring the flour in. You follow me so far? Now that task, if you think about it, that's a lot more difficult than just buying a mix, but it's even more difficult than buying the raw ingredients, because when you buy the raw ingredients, they aren't really the raw ingredients, they're all processed. So now I think it's a lot more difficult. Wouldn't you agree with that? I mean, you would need a lot of space now to plant the wheat. You would need a lot of space to plant the sugarcane, even the corn, if you wanted corn syrup. And even more room, I think, to raise the cow necessary to get the butter. Okay, you also are going to need a lot of time and a lot of material, because you're going to have to go from scratch. But worse than that, you're going to have to cut down and destroy a lot of stuff in order to plant and raise the stuff you need to make this silly cupcake. You're going to have to destroy a ton of stuff in the environment to plant the corn, to build the fence, to keep the, you're going to have to do some stuff, okay? But in the end, after you do all that work, After you use all that space, you use up all that time, all that material, right? After you leave that entire trail of stuff you have to knock over in order to plant the corn, all that trail of wreckage is in your path, but you do all that and you get all that flour, you grind it, you make a mess. There's a big mess everywhere, but now you have the raw ingredients and you can make a beautiful cupcake. Now imagine someone comes in your house and they find the cupcake on the counter and they say, you know, I can't accept that this cupcake was specially designed and created. I mean, think about it. There's all this hostile space outside in which there are no cupcakes. Seems like a lot of wasted space, a lot of wasted time and matter to me. Really? Can you see now why it's really unreasonable to deny the existence of a baker for the reasons you just offered? So I might have a mess all around my house, and I might have used up a lot of material and had to destroy a lot of stuff, and a lot of stuff got spilled. And there's a lot of places right now that there are no beautiful cupcakes, but there's one right here. And in spite of all that time that was required, the vast amount of space that's required, and the relatively hostile nature of no cupcakes anywhere else but here, there is no reason to deny the existence of a baker. As a matter of fact, I think there's good reason based on the nature of the cupcake to infer a baker. So I don't know why you would think for a second that a vast amount of material, I mean, God does what God does. The question is, do we have any good reason to believe the thing we're looking at is designed? Forget about the environment in which it sits. It turns out that there are certain magnetic fields, certain aspects and qualities of the universe that require enough space so that, for example, if you're in the wrong place inside the galaxy, the gravitational forces will not allow a solar system like ours. You have to have a certain amount of distance and certain kinds of attractions, a certain type of nearby objects, far away objects. It turns out that all of these things are not inconsequential, but they all have some impact on the overall environment in which you find the beautiful cupcake called Earth. So I think in the end, what we want to be able to demonstrate is that the size of the mess or the size of the environment or what has to be destroyed in order for something to emerge has nothing to do with whether or not there is a baker. And it also has nothing to do with whether or not there is a creator of the cupcake that we call planet Earth. So I've tried to give you 3 ways to respond to an observation that really tries to claim that the nature of the universe is such that there could be no creator because it's either too hostile, too large, too much wasted stuff, and we are too inconsequential. Really? None of those things would impact my inference of a creator, especially after I've given you the 3 approaches we just took. Hope that helps you to respond to this objection. And I look forward to seeing you right here next week at Cold Case Christianity.
Thanks for joining us at the Cold Case Christianity broadcast. If you're interested in more information about this week's topic, please visit coldcasechristianity.com. For a thorough investigation of the reliability of the New Testament Gospels and the case for Christianity, be sure to purchase Cold Case Christianity, God's Crime Scene, Forensic Faith, and Alive.